All right, hello everyone, and welcome back. So here's chapter 4, political economy. We'll try to keep this video as short as possible, at least under 20 minutes. If this was a normal class and we were in person, it'd probably take me 2 to 3 days to get through this lecture, though. There's just a lot to dive into when we discuss how the government interacts with our economy, how it's managing markets, property, providing public goods, and then how do we balance when government should actually intervene in the economy or when it should just kind of take a back seat and just say, hey, you know what? There's normal boom and bust cycles. We're going to let it figure itself out. Okay. So we'll highlight a few different thinkers and like thinkers who've contributed to the theories of political economy. And then we will also discuss different economic systems. Right. Now, what is political economy? It's just, once again, how does politics and economics, how do they interact, and where are we drawing the line when it comes to freedom and equality? Okay. Now, obviously, this is going to play a role when it comes to distribution of wealth and how this is going to affect the lifestyles of citizens within a country. Okay. Now, so some basic definitions. Obviously, you guys should know market, basic economy, supply and demand, those types of things, or sometimes it's called like the invisible hand. That's how Adam Smith would describe it when it comes to mercantilism, that guides what things are trending in the economy and what things will kind of lose value. Okay? Now, um, once again, if we look at markets, really simple. We have producers of goods. They're trying to fill the demand of the consumers, which is us. Obviously, us, we are looking for what as consumers? We are looking for either a better quality product or a cheaper price. Now, when there isn't competition in the marketplace, companies, or when a monopoly exists, companies don't really have any true incentive to either give us the best quality product or give us the lowest price. Once again, that goes back to basic supply and demand. Okay. But it is a medium of exchange for us, at least in these markets. Okay. Now, obviously, property is going to be ownership of goods and services. This is going to be your land, your business, personal items, and then obviously your intellectual property. That is why we have things such as patents and copyrights. Okay. Um, I just thought it'd be a kind of a funny picture to throw up. This old couple. I don't know if you guys remember. There was protests going around, and they were standing in their front yard. This was, I think, like pre-COVID or something like that, and they're standing out, defending their property. But obviously, we have the right to do that in America. This just got a lot of flack in the media and stuff like that. But regardless of that, how you defend property or property rights can differ across states. Okay. Um, Now, and the next thing obviously is going to be a public good. This is going to be something that's provided um, by your government. Roads, defense, education, healthcare. Really simple. Anything that's funded by the government, it's going to be a good for the most part. Not everything, but most things. Okay. And they're things that we as citizens, it's a benefit that we get for sacrificing our freedom that we would get normally out in the state of nature. Also, the sacrifice we make is we lose out on some of the revenue that we bring in from our jobs. So we're constantly getting taxed to fund these public goods. Okay. Obviously, some of these things we don't really like to like argue about. Like no one really wants to argue about money going to the roads or to education or healthcare. This defense one is a little debatable. Okay. Obviously, we get really upset when our government is using taxpayer money to bomb other countries. Um, but in general, most people would say, hey, you know what? It's okay that we use most of our budget to protect ourselves. It is a luxury that we have in comparison to other countries. Um, there are not too many other countries in the world that don't have the luxury of getting bombed on a daily basis. Okay. Also, when we fight wars, they're never really fought here on American land. Okay. Most of those conflicts take place in the area in which our enemy is located at or where the conflict arises at. So we do have that luxury in comparison to other countries, but obviously we put like nearly 50% of our budget into defense. So it's a heavy cost to pay, but it's very hard to put a price on at least safety here in America. I don't want to say peace because we are not the most peaceful country. Yeah. Now, social expenditures, okay? These are going to be state provided benefits, okay? This is support for the unemployed, elderly, poor, disabled. These are going to be all your social programs. That's it. Once again, a lot of people don't like complaining about these things. Like we we as a nation have decided together um, that we should be taking care of these kids. We should be taking care of the elderly and the disabled. Now, has there been arguments on this recently? Yeah, and it's a lot of it's going to be due to like the conversation usually stems around immigrants. Like, should immigrants have access? Illegal immigrants have access to this? And that's a tough conversation to have because obviously one side says they put a strain on the system. The other side says, well, hey, they're here trying to do the best that they can. They're looking for opportunity. Why would we strip them of this? Okay. If we strip them of this, what path is it going to lead them on? Which is kind of true. They might have no other option but to do what? Resort to violence. Okay. But it's a tough thing to deal with. Obviously, when we have an aging population and we have more people pulling out of these social expenditures and not giving in, it puts a really big strain on us. Okay, couple different countries going through this right now. Obviously, America is one. We have an aging population where we have so many people that are in retirement pulling out of these buckets, and we don't have enough people, working class people, paying their fair share into it. Okay. Same thing is going on in Japan. They have an aging population. One way to offset that, obviously, is actually to allow people to immigrate into your country. So that's kind of one of the ways that we've kind of stayed afloat because those people that do immigrate, some of them are actually paying their fair share and giving into these buckets. In Japan, and there's been protests and riots over this, they have chosen to actually bring in immigrants to fill in certain sectors of the economy. Now, the reason why there's debates is because one of the countries that they've chosen is to bring in people from India. Now, the reason why they would bring in people from India to fill in these sectors is because they are one of the fastest growing countries in the world. Okay. So, in order to sustain the population, every couple needs to have 2 kids. Okay. Now, they are exponentially increasing their population. So, they have an excess of people that they can lend out into the world. Okay. Now, why is there protests and why are there debates over this? Okay. There is debates mainly due to national and ethnic, or I guess religious conflict, which is something we talked about last chapter. Okay. It turns out that maybe the religion of these people is not blending, or I would say societal norms are not blending between Japanese and Indian people. Okay. Once again, I'm not here to lecture on like say, is it good? Is it bad? This is just a real world example that we're experiencing right now in the world. Okay. So now when it comes to taxation, okay, obviously no one really likes paying taxes. Okay. We pay taxes though, we're supposed to receive some type of benefit off of it. Okay. Now, tax levels vary. It sucks that we live in California because we get taxed at the state level way more than some of the other states. Okay. Like if you're living in Texas, obviously you're not going to have any income tax, but you will have a higher property tax to deal with. Okay. In California, one of the biggest things that we've been arguing about this fiscal year has been with gas prices. Okay. Obviously, gas prices as a whole have gone up, but in California, it's always more expensive. Why? We pay the most amount of state taxes at the pumps because we're trying to fund things like what? The high speed rail, which I worked on, by the way. Okay. And which will probably never get built. And it's been a project that's been extended way past its lifetime and cost us way more money than it's need to be. We said that that money and things like the bag tax is going to go to fix the roads and potholes and stuff like that. Yet we still haven't finished projects within the state. So I don't want to say that uh, taxation is all that bad. Like taxation is good when it comes to things like the school system. I actually learned this when I was a student. I didn't know that in California, we subsidize 2/3 of California taxpayer tuition. Okay. Now, what does that mean? So, like, usually when you look at tuition and you see out of state and in state, okay, turns out that the tuition costs the out of state. But since we want people to stay within our state and we want to keep talent here, taxpayers will subsidize 2/3 of that. I didn't understand that or didn't even know that was a thing until a professor actually brought it up and he said, hey, if you guys are messing around in my class, you guys are wasting taxpayer money. And I didn't understand that until he explained it. And he goes, so I'm here teaching you, and I'm also getting money pulled out of my check for you to pay 1/3 of the cost of what it costs to come to school here. So kind of an interesting way to look at it. Okay. Now, obviously, with the US government, they're going to receive not obviously not half your check. I just put this as a joke, a good amount of your check, and we're supposed to not have to deal with potholes in the roads. But sadly, our government kind of likes to just say fuck you and spend our money on a bunch of random things. Okay. Um, there's a government website that would track some of those things. I'll probably link it to you guys. And then obviously the Department of Government Efficiency has exposed some of this. Okay. You've also had some independent journalists like Tyler Oliveira and can't think of the other guy off that, Nick Shirley, who have exposed Somalian daycares and hospice centers, hospice care centers in LA, where some of our tax money has went to. And then obviously there's, we can address the elephant in the room that they were using taxpayer money to fund their parties to buy a bunch of pizza and hot dogs on that island. Okay. I think a lot of you guys can make assumptions on what I'm kind of referring to right now. But regardless though, we do need taxes to fund things like our social programs. It's one of the trade-offs that we give rather than fending for ourselves in the state of nature. Now, money in the state, okay, once again, money is going to be a medium of exchange. We create a currency. There's issues with American currency. Obviously, our currency is no longer backed by gold. And inflation has become a big issue for our country. Obviously, that's something that gets discussed in this chapter as well. Um, and we just have a certain amount of circulation of money, physical tender. Okay. Most of the time, money is just going to be zeros and ones in the bank, and that's pretty much it. And we're actually seeing our money become digitalized right now. Once again, you guys are living through history. We have noticed that what we value a penny at, it costs more to mint that than the actual value of it is. So what are we doing? We're phasing out pennies. What do you think would happen next? The rest of our change will be next. Okay. And we will soon move to this dystopian society where everything is now digital currency. And I find that very funny because a lot of politicians and a lot of people within the economy were against cryptocurrency because they said, oh, it's just a bunch of random numbers. It's not backed by anything. It's just digital stuff inside of a computer. American currency has been that since we are no longer backed by gold. Obviously, we have a certain circulation put into place, but when money gets printed, the value of the dollar goes down. Okay. So obviously, our American dollar is still valued. It's one of the reasons why we had a conflict in Iran because oil gets traded within the US dollar. They were looking at switching that to other types of currencies. Okay. Once again, another real world example that we've been living through in the last year. And here's just a couple SpongeBob references. I just thought this was funny to throw in there. And then Mr. Krabs, obviously, he's always known for his money. So we're all about his money. Then there's the central bank. Okay. It's the institution that controls the supply and demand and the cost of borrowing. So interest rates. Okay. Now, these interest rates, when they're low, it's going to mean that we want to have more people borrowing money and spending. Usually that's to expand our economy. And when higher rates hit, we're usually going to see less people borrowing money and we're going to see slower growth in our economy. That's kind of where we're at right now, at least here in America. Okay. Um, if you want to go and look at a certain time period or maybe a certain generation that messed this up for us, it's gonna be the generations around our grandparents' age. Okay, those are the people that were working, single family income, working a part-time minimum wage job, and they're able to afford a single family home and raise a family of four within a nice neighborhood. And now those same houses are worth at 20 times the cost that they bought them for. This is back when people were buying houses out of the newspapers. Oh, well, I grew up and minimum wage was only $5. That $5 was worth a lot more than what we're getting paid today. Okay. Obviously, in America, when it comes to interest rates and maybe the supply and demand of money, um, we haven't really matched wages growing at the same rate that inflation has gone up. So, once again, the central bank controls the cost of borrowing, lowers interest rates to stimulate the economy. We will stimulate the economy's growth. Last time we seen this is with during COVID, where we gave out stimulus checks because we wanted people to go out and spend a bunch of money. We have all the PPP loans which went out. Obviously, that caused a bunch of there's a bunch of fraud that went out in there too. But once again, another real life example that we've experienced within the last few years. Now, inflation, some of you guys can relate because some of you guys are actually kind of near my age. You got to see the beefy 5 layer burrito when it was 89 cents, less than $1. when dollar menus existed at McDonald's, not the value meals, those $3, $5 value meals. Those aren't even the goods that we think we think that's a good deal. It's not. And you would say like, okay, maybe we could justify 536 for the 5 layer burrito if the product has gotten bigger or if they're giving us more of the product. Has that product changed for the better? Probably not. If anything, it's probably gotten smaller. That would be shrinkflation. Okay, that's like if you another good example of this is think of a bag of chips. The price of a bag of chips has gone up. Um, Another way that companies can make profit off of it, they put more air in the bag and less chips. It's another way they can profit. Obviously, we've seen chips and soda prices go down exponentially because our government is no longer subsidizing those goods through SNAP. So if you wondered why sugary products have kind of gone down in the past year, it's because of that. So that's why sodas and chips have actually gone down in value. But um, it's ridiculous that people would pay 536 for a beefy 5 layer burrito. One of the things that me and my family actually like to laugh at, we like to laugh at like summer wages. Our stepdad had made a comment. He was like, when I started teaching in the 90s and I did summer school, I was getting paid 20 something dollars an hour or whatever. He goes, it must be nice you guys are getting paid, 60 plus, whatever it is. We did the math, and $20 back then would be the equivalent of what 60 to 70, I think it was like $72 is worth today. So even though on paper it says that he was getting paid a lower wage than us, his dollar amount was actually worth more. So it's sad. These are issues that we are dealing with right now. We can only hope that um, our demand stops exceeding the supply of money. So the next thing we'll discuss is hyperinflation. Your textbook gives a really good example of Zimbabwe. We don't want to be carrying around this huge wheelbarrow full of money just to purchase things such as like milk and stuff like that. Now, hyperinflation occurs specifically when there's inflation above 50% per month for 2+ months. Okay. And once again, this is caused by printing money to cover deficits. One of the other ways that you can obviously avoid, there's no other way to avoid a deficit other than, uh, producing more as a government. Obviously, some countries are take the risk and they borrow money and they go into debt. It's kind of like right now in America, we are in a deficit and we're trying to make our way out of it. So this hyperinflation though does lead to a currency collapse. Now, deflation, okay, this is when too many goods are chasing too little money. So falling prices reduces profits, leads to unemployment and reduced spending. And your textbook talks about Japan, which has experienced a long-term deflation. Right? Um, Not too sure if this would actually fit in obviously in today's current world, but your textbook obviously looks for like a historical example. I don't really think there's too many examples of deflation that we've actually seen. Usually we see the opposite, and there's more examples of inflation. So regulation is going to be the next thing. We want to regulate economy. Now that it's usually done through fiscal policy. Okay, this is going to be taxing. This is going to be rules and regulations that businesses have to follow, safety, environmental risks, employee benefits, and employee rights. Okay. And this is how we balance business interests with making sure the public is being taken care of. Obviously, private companies, their goal is to make money, and your government, its goal should be to take care of you. Obviously, it doesn't seem like they do all the time, but that's kind of how it's supposed to work. Now, the next thing is going to be trade. I'll put the Minecraft villagers in there, or the trader in there. Um, Obviously, when we think of trade, we think of maybe a little bit in a historical or a village sense where people used to trade goods, um, or would trade and barter. Okay. Obviously, we have trade deals with countries. Sometimes tariffs get thrown on top of those trade deals, and people like us have to foot that end of the bill. And then when our government decides to give out some tariff relief, instead of relieving the consumer, we relieve the producers of those goods. So once again, I don't want to get into the argument on whether or not tariffs are a good or a bad thing, but obviously we see that there may be some potential issues with it, and we've had to deal with some of those issues within the past year. Now, there's arguments over whether or not you should regulate trade. If you don't, you're just going to let it naturally figure itself out. Now, there are times where you need to protect the people. You know, you need to make sure that we're keeping wealth within the country. People are not being taken advantage of by an industry, and the market is fair. Remember, government needs to make sure that market failures do not exist and that they're trying to solve some of those things. Now, political economic systems, we'll talk about liberalism, social democracy, communism, and mercantilism. Liberalism is going to get tied to Adam Smith. His book is The Wealth of Nations. Social democracy is tied to Frederick List. Communism obviously is going to get tied to Karl Marx. I want to say we discussed him last chapter, and then social democracy. I'm getting lost because I have my short-term class, and we just talked about communism there. And then mercantilism with uh, Edward Bernstein. So these are the four major economic systems that we will discuss in this chapter, the big ones that you should actually know for this class. So the first one obviously going to be liberalism. You want to have a limited state role. It emphasizes individual freedom, low taxes, minimal regulation. We want to maximize personal liberty. This is something that we want here, that we value here in America. Okay. Obviously, if we look at an example of this, you can use the United States, you can use the UK, or you can look at the former British colonies. Okay. Now, what about with social democracy? This is going to balance a different balance between freedom and equality. Okay. Markets with strong state involvement, so you have a little bit more regulation, higher taxes because we want to fund programs. We want to reduce inequality. We want to even out the playing field. So this is getting closer to, so the first example that we talked about, liberalism, more of an emphasis on freedom, less on order. We're putting more of a balance on order here, less freedom. Communism, it'll be an increase on order once again, and then even less freedom there. So examples of this are going to be in Europe, so Germany and Sweden. Okay. Now we have communism. Once again, I don't think I have to go on a rant saying that this will never work, but it never will, unless you have a small group of individuals that are not diverse. And I think we could make the argument that it could work there, but whatever. Regardless, though, this video's already getting close to 20. It's already over 20 minutes, man. I need to hurry it up. Now, communism, okay? Obviously, there's no separation between the state and between the government, okay? Um, the state controls all economic resources because obviously through the idea of communism is that we can create full equality if your government is extensively regulating the markets. Okay. Examples of this are going to be the Soviet Union, obviously, with Karl Marx, Cuba, and North Korea. Now, the last one is going to be mercantilism. Okay. Now, in mercantilism, we're going to prioritize state power and national wealth. Okay. Low welfare spending, and we want to strengthen the state. Okay. Some examples of this obviously are going to be Japan and South Korea. Okay. Once again, every single one of these systems that we're talking about, there's always failures with them and there's always success stories. Okay. There's going to be pros and cons to each one. Obviously, in America, we talked about some of the cons that we are going through right now. Japan would be an example of mercantilism, obviously, and they're actually facing some similar issues that we're facing here in America. Then, obviously, I got a picture of the Wolf of Wall Street. Great movie that I just throw that in there. So, how do we measure economic outcomes? This is usually how we just measure countries. Okay. GDP, the value of goods and services per capita, the average wealth that individuals have. The Gini index looks at inequality. HDI is going to be your life expectancy, education, and income. And the last thing is going to be economic growth, long-term expansion. And then once again on the SpongeBob reference. I love SpongeBob, so we've just been throwing them in to every single PowerPoint. Now, freedom and equality in systems. Okay, this just kind of discusses high freedom versus equal freedom versus equality, the balance between the two. Obviously, you should kind of know this to better understand each type of system. And then that concludes it for this chapter. One of the other things that your text highlights is actually happiness. Okay. Usually when your government does a really good job of regulating its economy or the economy is doing well, guess what? People usually have less complaints about their government. And when people are going through tough times or struggling, there's obviously it's going to warrant more complaints. That's probably why we've had a pretty good divide because since 2008 or in 2008, we have the market crash, we have the recession here in America. We never really truly recover. We somewhat were on the rise, on the way back up. And then COVID happens, and then we hit somewhat of a mini recession. And then now we're in our current state where people are wondering, is a recession going to happen soon? And we might be on the brink. We're waiting for these bubbles to burst. Obviously, the housing bubble bursted with our recession in 2008. Now we're really concerned is this when will this AI bubble burst? Because that is what our economy is kind of banking on right now. But let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope things get kind of turned around in our economy. And that concludes chapter 4. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I know we're right at like 25 minutes, obviously, and hopefully you've been enjoying the class. So I'll see you guys in the next one.